Welcome to the Love the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas. Joined as always by former scout Super Bowl winner Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He is also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network. And a little bit more of a somber tone as we open today's episode of Love the Star. We, of course, got the news on Monday of the passing of, I think you could say, taking positional value or anything else, to taking that context out of it and just in a vacuum, arguably the greatest player in the history of the Dallas Cowboys. And Larry Allen passing away over the weekend. That news broke on Monday. He dies at the age of 52. And we'll get into OTAs and some questions and stuff like that a little bit later in the show. But, wanted to open with some discussion about Larry Allen and some thoughts with him, and just really devastating news, sad news for a lot of people in the Cowboys community, and something that I know, Brian, just from people you and I have talked to, this was not something that a lot of people were expecting or had heard. And I know a few folks had said, Larry's not been necessarily the easiest one to get a hold of in the last couple of years. And we get this news that he passed away in Mexico over the weekend. So very, very sad news on the passing of Larry Allen.
Yeah, you're right, Bobby. And I was with Larry in the latter stages of his career with the Dallas Cowboys in the early 2000s. And then competed against him several years before that when Green Bay, when he was one of the best to ever play. And you mentioned, regardless of position, he is one of the best to ever play football in the NFL. And such a dominant player, the power, the ability just to get movement, just coming off the ball. Larry Allen was one of the first that I remember scouting that you watched him just knock people down at the line of scrimmage, stay on his feet, and then with power again knock somebody else down. When he was scouted in 1994 in that draft, Sonoma State ran a 5.2 at the combine. You're kind of looking at things. This is when bench press was first getting its start. He didn't bench press that day. I'm sure he would have done 1 million if they would have let him. He was that type of guy when you talked about strength. I'll never forget in Green Bay, our doctors failed him on a physical. He had a rotator cuff problem in his shoulder, and Dr. McKenzie and the staff failed him on the physical. And then the Cowboys pick him, and Ron Wolf, our general manager, before we played the Cowboys, Ron Wolf would walk down to Dr. McKenzie and go, "You see that number 73? He is going to kick our ass today. Just want to let you know, that's Larry Allen, remember? He is going to kick our ass today." And, Dr. McKenzie would go, "Yes, Ron, I understand. I understand." And but that's what Larry Allen did. He kicked your ass. He did it with a smile on his face, too. And not a lot of people know Larry Allen. He didn't get particularly close. His teammates were close to him, but working in the front office and stuff, I just remember Jerry Jones always doing everything in his power to help Larry, especially late in his career with the Cowboys. When Bill Parcells came in, Bill tried to run Larry Allen off. And I thought it was a cruel thing. I thought it was very cruel for a guy who, and Larry Allen clearly wasn't the player that he was. He did make another Pro Bowl once he left Dallas, but probably more in name than ability there. But to be a part of a staff that tried to run that guy off, that was hard. That was really hard. Because you knew what he meant to the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, he wasn't the same player, but he was dealing with so much. And Bill made it very difficult. Bill made it very difficult for Larry, and him and Larry butted heads quite a bit, and it was tough. And you hated to see a guy who was a legend have to, in his latter days as a member of the Dallas Cowboys, struggle so badly with that. And it was unfortunate. And I'll never forget it because it reminds me to this day of how I want to treat people if you get that opportunity. The respect, the acknowledgement. Yeah, the scouting is a cruel business. Building teams, cruel business. And sometimes it's not very personal. It's not very loving and all that. But, we dealt with that, and that was not good. That was not good for a lot of people with the Cowboys. And I should be addressing Larry Allen, the great player. We all know what a great player he was. I just feel terrible that Larry Allen's last days as a Dallas Cowboy were not what they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it, of all the crap that we did in 2000 and 2001 and 2002, until Parcells came, all that crap that we did, it was par for the course. That we now have problems with Larry Allen. And that to me was one of the biggest regrets that I have working with the Dallas Cowboys was him, Darren Woodson, two guys, two warriors of an era of that Cowboy history that was just outstanding. And we treat, like I say, Darren Woodson, because of the injury, Larry Allen was banged up and dealing with a lot. And Bill Parcells, those final days weren't good. And that's a shame. I tend to remember that more than I remember what a great player he was, competing against us in Green Bay, and then what he was able to do with the Dallas Cowboys.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Do you think that the way that departure went for Larry Allen sort of informs some of the way that Jerry has handled other veterans after that, where people feel like, hey, are you holding on too long? Are you doing too much work? Do you think some of the memories of, I don't like how that ended, maybe is why Jerry does try to have such a gracious exit with so many veterans now?
I think it's part of it. I think that Randy Moss taught him a lesson. And I think that Larry Allen taught him a lesson. Larry Allen needed help off the field. And Jerry Jones was there with whatever resources he could to get Larry Allen help. And I just, that player meant so much to Jerry. You could talk about the Emmets and the Troys, the Michael Irvins. Larry Allen, when you start to talk about the history of the Dallas Cowboys, if you're not mentioning Larry Allen as one, and this is predates, the Cowboys have had a history. Like I say, I started going to games in the late 60s, as a kid. And, I always remind people from 1960 to 1980, 85, 86, Dallas Cowboys were a really good football team, And people act like, well, the history of the Cowboys were from 1989 to now. No. There's 20 straight winning seasons. So this team, this organization, the Cowboy fans know this. There is a great history here. And Larry Allen could have played with Bob Lilly and Roger Staubach and Bob Hayes and Rayfield Wright. He could have played with those guys. And he would have been, he was a generational player. And I mean that in a generation, whatever generation you're in, football-wise, he could have played when they didn't have face masks. He could have played in the 60s when the merger, in 1970 when the merger happened. He could have played in the late 70s with Roger Staubach. He could have played in the 80s with teams 3 straight years that were going to the NFC Championship game, with Danny White and that crew. Drew Pearson, that crew. And, but he happened to come into an era, it's a shame that he didn't get to the Cowboys in 1992. He got to you in 1994, and his career went through, and this player was, words can't describe him. Words can't describe. And to your question, I know I was just rambling there, Bobby, and I'm sorry about
please.
But I'm telling you, Jerry Jones, he had, when Bill was doing this, Jerry was like, well, let's, come on, work with him, Bill. Don't be that guy. Work with him. Jerry, Bill, work with him. And I'm, if you're watching this video, I'm using one hand to kind of be Jerry and one hand to be Bill, and it was, and Jerry was trying. He really was trying, because of what you mentioned. He had that kind of love for the player and what the player had meant to him. And so when Larry was done and, off the field and stuff, and he needed help, Jerry Jones was there to help, because Larry Allen gave everything he had to Jerry Jones to win championships. That's where this was at.
Yeah, when you talk about, how difficult the words are to describe him, because he, like I say, it's anything you say feels insufficient, and if you didn't see Larry Allen, it sounds like you're exaggerating. But those who saw him, it feels like that's the discrepancy. If you didn't see him, it sounds like you're exaggerating. If you saw him, it feels like you're not saying enough.
Yeah.
And describing what kind of player was. We talk all the time about how, can you make the switch from guard to tackle the guard? Can you make the switch from the left side to the right side? This is a guy who is a first-team All-Pro right guard in 1997. And then in 1998 was a first-team All-Pro left tackle. He made the side and the position switch. Yeah. And then in 1999 was a first-team All-Pro left guard. And if he would have spent more time at right tackle than his rookie season, he would have been a first-team All-Pro at right tackle too. Yeah. He was just the most... If you want testaments of how great he is, and you can search these out, just go look for clips right now of former players talking about what it was like to go against him. And, Antonio Pierce, the head coach of the Raiders, who used to be a linebacker for the Giants, talked about, I know he was on Max Crosby's podcast earlier this year, and he said Larry Allen used to come up to the line of scrimmage with that big dip in his lip.
Yeah.
And he said Larry used to spit dip in the direction of letting you know where he was going to go and basically dare you to come through his gap.
Yeah.
And that he'd just say, like, all right, I'm going to be right there. Justin Tuck used to talk about that veterans would tell him Larry would get to the line and go, choo, choo, and, like, tell you where he was going to, like, basically say, I'm coming here, and you're not going to be able to stop it. We're going to get 20 yards on you here. And he's somebody, Takeo Spikes, I know, told the story of he thought the first time we went up against him, he was going to just bowl him over. And he said he hit him, and he said it was like he had run to the hardest wall he had ever hit. Mm-hmm. And Larry got his hands on him and threw him. And he said as he was falling, he just kept thinking, run away, get away, don't let him pancake you. Everybody's going to see this on tape. And he said they got into the film room on the following Monday, and everybody was like, boy, you crawl pretty fast there, rookie. You get away pretty fast. And he said he was just crawling away, tried his best to get out of the way, because like, I don't want to be on tape getting pancake because he's coming over here to finish me, and I got to get out of the way. Players were terrified of him. They were terrified to go up against him and the pain that he would inflict. He was just the most dominant type of player that you could ever see. Anything that you could say about, I mean, goodness, anything you could say about Peyton Manning as a quarterback, you could say about Larry Allen as an offensive lineman in terms of that quality of play. Like, he is that high up in terms of being one of the greatest of all time.
My experience with him in Green Bay, when we had a really good defensive line. Reggie White, Sean Jones, Gilbert Brown, Bryce Popp, Santana Dotson. We had really good defensive linemen. I've never seen a guy. Gilbert Brown was well over 330 pounds. Huge man for that time.
Yep.
Larry Allen was a huge man for that time too. I've never seen Gilbert Brown get moved out of a hole as many times as I did with him dealing with Larry Allen. Nobody wanted to play. Reggie White had his time where he didn't want anything to do with Eric Williams, Gilbert Brown, Santana Dotson, those guys, John Yurkovic. Nobody wanted anything to do with Larry Allen. Larry Allen was he'd just come off the ball and he'd get into you and just start moving, and you couldn't stop. You couldn't set your feet fast enough. The poor he would create holes and opportunities. And then you got Daryl Moose Johnston leading the way and Emmett running behind that. And, it was tough. These guys were as tough. And Larry was a big part of that. Larry, that offensive line, they talk about Eric Williams and Tuanay and Stepnowski and Nate Newton and all that. Yeah, the guy you didn't want to deal with was that number 73. That's the one you didn't want to deal with.
Just a fantastic player and a guy that, struck fear into the hearts of opponents with the way that, he would just dominate them with his power. The strongest player in the history of the NFL, arguably. I mean, the guy played with ridiculous power. John Randall used to talk about the fact that linebackers would come into the huddle and they would almost sound terrified after coming off of a rep against Larry Allen. They would say, what do I do? And he said it's the only time he could recall seeing grown men almost terrified to go out there and play a snap was when linebackers knew they were going to have to deal with Larry Allen coming through. And he said, buddy, John Randall used to tell him, pray. I don't know, man. He's scary.
Hey, if I could tell a real quick funny story, I know we're up against our
go ahead
break, but Larry Parcells used to have everybody weigh in, and he used to fine the guys like $100 for every pound you're overweight. And Larry Allen used to show up at the weigh-in with like a wad of cash, and he'd be 16 pounds overweight. He'd just peel off 16 $100 bills and just put them down and walk away. He wouldn't even. He just didn't even. He didn't even care. I mean, he just like, yeah, whatever you want me to weigh, fine. But he would come in just, But that's Larry Allen. He was big. He was burly. He was tough. And Parcells had all these. You're going to weigh this, weigh that. Larry just peel off those $100 bills and put them all down. He'd walk off the scale and go to the next thing he had to be at. Wonderful guy, really a wonderful guy.
Yeah, and a guy who I know Tyler Smith talked about it last week. He was asked about Larry Allen and some of what he knows about him, and had shared it and said, I know, he dealt with some health issues as a kid, where it was kind of a miracle that he even made it out of childhood, and he made it out of a tough area growing up, and was an underdog story, obviously, with talk about the medicals and the small school and everything else. But he was one of a kind, and one of the most dominant players in the history of the NFL. You could make the argument one of the most dominant players at his position in the history of sports. He was just that incredible, could take over games.
You're not lying. Everything you're saying, and trust me, I lived with the man. I got to see him play, and I got to see him play against me. And everything that everybody is saying about him is absolutely 100% true. Saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah, and he is special, and he will be sincerely missed by Cowboys fans and NFL people
and his
alike.
Teammates too.
You're going to see a lot of tributes over the coming days, and just a really, really unique and special individual. You are listening to the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, when this podcast drops, we're recording it on Monday night. When this drops on Tuesday morning, it will be mandatory minicamp day out at the Star in Frisco. We will be out there.
Let's go.
We will be, and we'll be in attendance and checking everything out. We got a chance to be out at OTAs last week. Some of your just takeaways, your thoughts, what stands out to you? I think there are a couple of different directions you can go there. Obviously, we're limited on you didn't have 100% attendance. Even veterans who were there weren't necessarily practicing. You don't have pads on or anything. And so there's some things that'll naturally be limited. But what kind of stood out to you, whether it be with the personnel or what you saw from players and flashed for you?
Well, I appreciate you asking the question to Deuce Vaughn about him playing some more wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate you doing that.
Yes, sir.
I would like to also talk about when they went with the second group 2-minute drill, final drill of the day. It wasn't Cooper Rush. It was Trey Lance.
Yep.
Got those reps. They've got Guyton and BB down with the 2s and 3s. Well, really probably the 3s because they're getting all the reps down there, getting all the reps. They're not getting all the reps up with the 1s and 2s. It seems to be that Adoga and Awesome Richards are up there splitting reps at left tackle. So
and center was Hoffman and Bass.
Center was Hoffman and Bass. Yeah. So, but they'll tell you, hey, by being at one end, they get all the reps down here, and they don't have to split reps up here. And so, I hope that there'll be a practice or two where we get to see BB with the 1s, with Smith and others. I hope Guyton will get an opportunity to do some stuff as well. I am totally on board with anything that Trey Lance is doing over Cooper Rush.
Yes.
And I mean that in no disrespect to Cooper Rush.
We know what Cooper Rush is.
I need to know where Trey Lance is right now. And so, with all that being said, I need to think about what's going on. They're really, really thin at defensive line now.
Yes, that is for sure.
And that's where the depth, that's where you don't see the, with the guys that are being gone with no Lawrence, with no Mozzie Smith, you see a lot of bodies of guys that'll be playing in the third preseason game and might likely be on a practice squad or something like that. Guys like, Durrell Johnson.
Or even bodies playing where they may not necessarily play, like Marshawn Neeland playing some defensive tackle.
Playing into the 3 technique. So, they're trying to kind of work around some things. And, we'll see what Tuesday, Wednesday bring for us as far as a little bit more evaluations.
Yeah, let's talk about Trey Lance for a second. He's got really impressive physical tools. Obviously, that's the athleticism and the ability to he's got a big arm. He can do a lot of these different things. Brian, I don't know if this is a symptom of. It's not an arm strength issue, I don't think. I think it's more probably just a feel for how quickly do you got to get the ball over there and stuff like that. One of the things I will say, watching Trey Lance out there practice, I thought throwing outside the numbers, little late a couple times there.
Yeah, he held the ball a little bit longer than I probably would on some of these.
A couple times it was like, okay, is that the guy who just has 500 career passes between high school, college, and pros, not knowing how quickly he's got to get the ball over there?
Yeah.
Or is it just throwing to that, outside the numbers, doesn't have as much zip as I had anticipated. That showed up. I think he looks clean in terms of his footwork mechanics. Like the foot mechanics look good out there. It looks like he spent a lot of time on that. And again, the physical tools are impressive. I think if you're looking for wow moments at practice, where you're going to say, oh, this is what maybe he's got a chance to replace Dak if they walk away from Dak. I don't think you've seen any of that yet. I mean, the most impressive.
We're in the very, very, early stages.
Yes. Just the most impressive throws at practice the other day were Dak's. The one deep to Cooks, like
the seams.
So he's still coming. If you're looking for flash throws, that hasn't shown up yet for us with Trey Lance. I will say this: the guy who. And I know I've mentioned him before, but the guy who impressed me, I guess that popped a little bit for me at this practice last week, Brian, was I really, really do like Jalen Brooks. And I like the way that he snatches the ball, his catch radius, the way he adjusts to the ball. That was the guy out at that practice who, if you want to talk about just throwing his hands up and plucking the ball out of the air and snatching it, his hands are really good. Now, he did have one drop near the end of practice, looked like a concentration thing, but man, he's got
Tolbert had. Did you see the one Tolbert had?
Yeah.
The bat, it was like a comeback.
Yeah.
Dak put it right on the one, and he just, for some reason, the body position was bad. The hands were bad. It's kind of like he got caught between body catching it and wanting to extend his hands.
Yeah, and again, they were kind of thin at receiver too, obviously, because CeeDee Lamb wasn't there, and you've got just some injuries and to guys who are still coming back that they will work in eventually, like David Durden and people like that. But man, if you're looking early on at just who looks the most prepared to be a third wide receiver, I don't know about you, Brian. To me, it honestly looked like Jalen Brooks. That was the guy that I thought, watching that practice, that I thought that looks like the kind of, to me, outside of CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Brooks in these practices is the best bad ball catcher I've seen over the last 2 years. Brooks knows how to adjust to the ball. He's got vacuum hands. He can, fight through contact, make contested catches. I think that there's a lot of intriguing upside with Brooks that, if we get into training camp, I just wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing this battle and think Brooks is maybe ahead of Tolbert.
I think Brooks seems like a very confident guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to believe when I watched Tolbert, as you did, out of South Alabama, that I saw a confident guy. But man, that drop, he came back with a couple other catches. What's funny is they had a fourth down situation, a couple of them, and fourth down. Let me see. Let me look at the situations here. 4th and 1s, 4th and 5. They took Lance took a deep shot to Tolbert on a 4th and 5 play. That's where I felt like he held the ball like a little bit too long, to be honest with you there. But I was trying to think. Prescott had a 4th down situation, and he threw the ball for a first down to Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn playing out of the slot. So, I was, you're talking about guys, confident guys, and how they look. I mean, Brooks looks like a confident guy out there running routes and catching the ball. And then you see Tolbert that one time, he got caught. I think he got caught between, I'm going to body catch this thing or I'm going to catch it in my hands. And his body position was bad. And, but Brooks, you don't see him just playing balls.
No. And he's, like I said, he had the one misstep on the catch. I don't know if I don't know if you had seen that one or if you had already.
Well, he had a 4th and 2. No, he had a 4th and 2 reception. I'm looking here. It was 83. Yeah. Dak hit him on a 4th and 2. He had a catch on that drill.
Yeah. And like I said, there were like 3 catches he made where it stands out of, it was not cradle catching or body catching or any of that. It's him going up and snatching the ball out of the air. The hands are really impressive to me. And I think that's building on some of what we saw.
That was in the 7-on-7.
Yeah.
That was on 7-on-7. And then also, too, I mentioned the 4th down. It was not Dak. It was Cooper Rush threw the ball to Deuce Vaughn on a 4th and 2. I put that in my notes as well.
And so I think that one of the other things that stood out to me about the receiver group before we get to some of our mailbag questions here, Brian, one of the things that was interesting to me was on that pass, the big pass of the day, the big play of the day, that 65-yarder in the air to Brandon Cooks.
Oh, you're talking about 7 on. Okay, I just found my notes. Prescott to Brooks drop on an in cut.
Yeah, that was the one.
7-on-7.
Yeah, right. That was the one drop that he had. Yep. But he had 3 others where he plucked it out of the air.
Yeah.
But the Cooks pass, the 65-yarder in the air. I don't know. Were you? Because I know you
saw that. I was sitting.
Yeah. So that was Cooks runs right by the DB. I can't remember who was on him.
It was okay. That was it. Went by. It was Bland.
Bland. Yeah. So I mean, Cooks runs clear past him.
Yeah. It was 4th and 3.
Yeah.
The call was 4th and 3, and they went on a deep shot. Oh wait, not 4th and 3. That's Prescott to Cooks, 4 and 3. That was a deep shot on Bland. Yes, and it was a big time play.
Yeah, and it was Cooks gets 5 yards behind him, easy, and Dak puts the ball right on the money for him. What it did was it served as a reminder to me of why didn't this team take more advantage of because we saw it all last summer. Last summer we saw Cooks in every practice.
He had to take over the role of Gallup,
running by DBs every single practice. Yeah. And we see it again this one. And it's like, why did we get into games and not take these same sort of shots where Cooks was having success, flashing that sort of speed? It was not a Cooks issue last year. It's not like Cooks wasn't running by people. No. They weren't asking him to.
They weren't.
And so that was a reminder to me of just please incorporate some of that into the offense this year.
I think what happened, though, Bobby, is Cooks had to take over for Gallup's role and the underneath stuff, and he became more of an underneath receiver than he did a vertical receiver.
Yeah, some of what he probably had to do. We saw that on display in the very first game of the year against the Giants, where he had to have some of those, like he had the 4th down catch on a slant, and he had to do some of that shorter out stuff. But Cooks, again, it's just a reminder that if you want big play, big speed ability, like Cooks can still do that.
Can run.
Clarence Hill from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, his favorite little trivia note to tell everybody last week, and it's surprising. We always talk about, sort of how old Brandon Cooks is, or man, he's getting up there. He's younger than Dak.
Yeah.
He's like 2 months younger than Dak Prescott, and we talk about him like he's 35, but he can still move. He's still really impressive. I want to see more Brandon Cooks. Okay. Yep, that's what I want to see. In fact,
but more maybe Jalen Brooks too. From what you,
absolutely. In fact, my Chill Boys ballsy take of the day, Brian.
I like that.
Is going to be and by the way, Father's Day right around the corner.
Coming up. Yes, Father's Day.
Chillboys.com, promo code STAR.
Hey,
15% off. Great Father's Day gift.
My guys on the show, Zach Wolchuk on 105.3 The Fan on the G-Bag Nation. He's wearing Chill Boys now. He says, Broadus, where have I been with this underwear? And I'm like, bro, I'm telling you, man, comfortable underwear, comfortable socks, T-shirts. But you're right, Father's Day is coming up, so make that happen, moms out there, or dads, if you want to buy yourself your own Father's Day gift. Chill Boys.
Exactly. Chillboys.com, promo code STAR, 15% off. They're great. Like I say, Zach Wolchuk has gotten in our underwear. If you want to get in our underwear, you can do it too.
But the ballsy call of the week?
The ballsy take of the week.
Chill Boys ballsy take of the week.
Jalen Brooks will be the 3rd receiver. Yeah. That's going to happen.
It's funny. I kind of feel like the way the targets are going to go, Lamb, Ferguson, and I was thinking Cooks.
We've actually got a question about that coming up in our mailbag that you can answer. So we'll get to that here in just a second. Let me remind you guys that this is the Love the Star podcast. The Love the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time for our Dean Julia Love the Star mailbag. It is where we turn things over to our dear, sweet listeners for their thoughts, their comments, and the topics that they want to talk about. And we just mentioned the receiving threats, the targets, how things will break out this year. So Chris Hodnett is asking the question, rank the top 5 Cowboys for 2024 receiving yards, regardless of position. So you can include backs, receivers, tight ends here. It sounds like you've got number 1, Lamb, obviously, but number 2 would be Ferguson.
Lamb, Ferguson, Cooks. Man, you're starting to try and sell me on
Brooks.
Brooks. I'm going to say
not a running back or a second tight end.
No, I'm not going to say a second tight. I'm just going to go straight receivers here. I'm going to say it's Cooks, Tolbert, Brooks.
All right.
Right?
Yes,
Cooks,
I'm going
to Tolbert, Brooks.
I'm going to say Lamb, Ferguson, Cooks, just like you. Yeah. And then I will say Brooks.
And then a runner. You're going to go with I don't know what running back's going to make this team, so I don't want to put a runner in.
I'll say Dowdle.
Yeah.
I'll say Dowdle 5.
I see what you're doing there.
Yeah. I mean, it's now that's that is one of the things we saw. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see if that comes along a little faster.
I know.
One of the things that we did see out there is that, I mean, it's still split reps. Basically, it is kind of 1-2 punch with Dowdle and Zeke right now. That's the
Zeke was
combo.
with the ones when it started off in the 2-minute drill, though, right?
Yeah, now Dowdle at the start of some of the team period and stuff like that, he was getting exclusively the 1 reps with the first team. So I mean, it's kind of a rotation.
It's a rotation,
and that's what they're leaning on right now. All right, next question here from Todd Mack. Todd is asking, who is stronger, literally, offensive tackle, Richards or Guyton?
I'm going to say Guyton.
Yeah, I think Guyton plays with a lot more power.
You know what? What was it that I said to you the other day about offensive tackles? But they're hiding things when they're wearing long sleeves.
Oh yeah, we're at a camp. Broadus saying that if they're wearing
back on this one.
If they're wearing long like sweatpants and they've got like long sleeve shirt on, and you're an offensive lineman and you're out at these OTA practices, he thinks you're trying to hide your lack of muscle mass out at these practices. And Awesome Richards had the long sleeves and the long pants.
Ball had it on too. Ball and
I think Let's-Go did.
Yeah, if maybe you're hiding arms and legs a little bit, but your big burly guys like your BBs and guys like that and Bass, TJ Bass, those guys,
they want to show those guns off.
Short sleeve shirt, short T-shirt, and so you've got to answer your question. I think Guyton, gosh, they're both, but see, Guyton's arms are so long. You wonder how much power. I think he's got some pop, but I don't know if you had to bench press. Man, both those guys have really long arms. But
strength, I would think Guyton still plays stronger.
Guyton is stronger, yeah. I think so too.
Next question here from John. How many?
That's a great question, by the way.
It is. How many of Mukuamu, Nashawn Wright, and Eric Scott do you think make the 53-man roster?
This was a question from last week.
Yes, that's one of the. I've got some banked away.
Who answered this?
John.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your question. I honestly think then the order they are. Even though Scott had an interception, the final play of the 2-minute was Trey Lance.
Was that Scott on that one?
I think it was Scott. It was 37. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was 31. I didn't know who it was.
No, I think that was 37 on that side.
That was also, wasn't it a Wanye Thomas tip? Somebody had tipped it up in the air.
The ball, he tried to throw it over the top.
And he couldn't.
It was. I think it was Scott that came away with the ball.
By the way, I will say, I do want to point out one more player really quickly that we didn't talk about last time. When you talk about people that impressed me, I know there was a lot of people who killed the pick at the time. I did think Maris Leofau flashed in coverage a couple different times.
I should have paid better attention. I got
Leofau. They tried to drop a couple passes over Leofau's head between the safeties, and he tipped them both away.
There you go.
He
I got lost. I need to watch him. I'm making a point Tuesday, Wednesday to make sure I have a little bit better understanding of what he was doing.
Yeah, but I mean, he was somebody who I thought was impressive. Now, I'm not going to let you get away with it. Mukuamu, Wright, or Scott, how many of them make it? How many? Not the order. How many make it? And you think it's Mukuamu?
Yeah.
Is Mukuamu a safety or a corner here, do you think?
Corner.
It's interesting. Wright was... So there were a lot of different corners missing. Diggs was not there, obviously. I mean, they were still... it felt like they were trying to work Lewis back in kind of a little bit at a time as he recovers from some injuries and things like that. But, Wright was out there getting some work with the first team, but I don't know. Mukuamu to me is still, I'm starting to probably sound like some of these coaches who fall in love with certain players, Brian, but I
see Carson get work too.
Yeah.
A guy Carlson. Carson.
Jalen Carson.
Yep. Yeah. Getting work. Yeah.
I just can't get out of my head some of the reps I've seen Mukuamu take in training camp against Lamb, where he held him down. And I'm just like, it's hard to twice back-to-back plays in Oxnard a couple years ago when I watched Mukuamu take Lamb all the way across the field and knock the ball away. Back-to-back out of the slot. That's tough to forget.
Yeah, Brian. I think Wright's in trouble, and I think Scott's probably in trouble too.
Yeah, I mean, it's you've got to make it click at some point.
Previous regimes,
Yep. Last question here from Titanic Gambler. Brian, what makes you most optimistic about the team's 2024 season and the next 3 to 5 years?
You want to answer that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that
you think they signed Prescott?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, that optimism is that you've got Dak Prescott as a quarterback, because I think he could still play. I talked to somebody though today, a guy in the league, and he says,
Roger Goodell,
as good as Prescott was last year, could this where we start to see him start going down?
It would be, if he does, that would be a break from what we've seen historically from quarterbacks over the last 20 years. Right. Quarterbacks generally play best into their mid-30s.
Yeah, this guy he's from another team, and he's like, this would I be worried about signing Dak? Would this be the time he starts to go down, because he played so great last year?
Yeah.
But I would say what I'm optimistic about, I'm optimistic that I feel like that this offensive line now,
it's trending the right direction.
We very well could lose Zach Martin after this season.
Yep.
And depending on how well our guy at right tackle plays Steele, if he comes back, if his health comes back, and he was like who he was the previous. But, man, I do feel good. I know there's some questions about Guyton, but I feel good about him. I feel good about Smith. I feel good about Beebe. I feel good about Bass. This offensive line might be all right when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and I think that's a reason for optimism. I think Lamb being the player that he is a reason for optimism.
Yeah, you sign Lamb to an extension. I think Lamb is only going to get better.
Yeah, Lamb.
Oh, by the way, can I say something real quick too?
Yeah.
I asked somebody in the league today who understands cap.
Yeah, because Justin Jefferson got his deal done, 4 years, $140 million. That's $35 million annually.
The $35 million is real.
He's making,
real. It's real. It's not because I had somebody tell me, I'm like, well, that Hill in Miami's a $30 million. No, Brian, he's a $26 million player. When you look at all the numbers and so I reached out to my guy who told me that. I said, have you seen the numbers? He goes, the $35 million a year is real. It's a real number.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that's going to impact the Lamb negotiations.
Sometimes you get inflated numbers. I think Lamb, if you pay him, I think Lamb is going to get better. I do, but I do worry about him. You can know the ball's going to him, and teams still have trouble covering him.
Yes,
he finds ways to get open, but he needs to develop that. You know what? I'm not going to let things bother me a bit.
Yeah,
because that could
which he's improved on. I think incrementally he improves. He's very competitive. It's the way that things go. But also not just Lamb and the offensive line. I always go back to it. Will McClay and the scouting staff that they have will always keep them competitive. As long as they have draft picks, they'll always keep them competitive. I don't think they'll ever be worse than being a 9-8 team. Unless they just get decimated with everybody getting hurt, they are always going to be competitive because of the work that. Go down the list. Will McClay, Chris Vaughn, Mitch LaPointe, Klein Kubiak, Ross Winchy, their area scouts, Justin Stuckey, Eric Ellingworth, like the work that these guys do, Sam Garza, up and down that scouting staff, they will always keep them competitive. Are they going to be perfect? No, like the numbers just say sometimes you're going to have a dud class, but the hit rate for the Cowboys over the course of a decade with this scouting staff has been so much higher.
Brett Maxey too.
Yeah, Brett Maxey, another one. Like I said, lots of different guys there who are really good talent evaluators. Very good talent evaluators. And that's something that they're really they've had a lot of success with. And as long as they keep most of that group together,
forgot about Chris Hall too.
They will continue. Yeah, they'll continue. Just the whole scouting staff. They're great. They will continue to keep this team competitive. And so, if you're looking for optimism for that, there it is right there. Is that they'll continue to find Deron Bland, and even though he's gone in free agency, 4th round Tyler Biadasz making a Pro Bowl at center is a hit. Tony Pollard being the player he was out of the 4th round is a hit, so they'll keep you competitive in that way. All right, that does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back out at minicamp this week with some more takeaways and some more thoughts from there. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Belt. We'll talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.